Welcome to Noun Tutorial TV. Like, share and subscribe. GST202, Conflict and Resolution Summary. The Latin word dash is as old as mankind. Conflict. UN stands for dash dash. United Nations. The word conflict is derived from the Latin word dash dash. Confligere. The word conflict is derived from the Latin word confligere, meaning to dash dash. Strike together. The Latin word confligere means to dash dash. Strike together. Dash is a normal, natural, and inevitable phenomenon in any interactive situation of human life. Conflict. Conflict is a dash of social change and that leads to constructive transformation. Byproduct. Conflict is not necessarily negative in itself. True. Conflict is a byproduct of social change and that leads to constructive dash dash. Transformation. Quickie Wright, 1990, defined dash as opposition among social entities directed against one another. It distinguished competition and defined it as opposition among social entities independently striving for something of which the resources are inadequate to satisfy all. Conflict. Dash defined conflict as opposition among social entities directed against one another. It distinguished competition and defined it as opposition among social entities independently striving for something of which the resources are inadequate to satisfy all. Quickie Wright, 1990. Dash asserted that conflicts are themselves processes that tend to degenerate from nonviolent to violent and from crisis to full-scale war. Quickie writes. According to Quickie Wright, dash is considered a situation during which two or more political groups are equally entitled to settle conflict by armed force. War. In the sociological sense, dash refers to conflicts among political groups carried on by armed forces of considerable magnitude. War. Kreisberg, 1973:17, defines dash as a relationship between two or more parties who believe they have incompatible goals. Conflict. Dash defines conflict as a situation in which two or more human beings desire goals which they perceived as being obtainable by one or the other, but not both. Stagner. Stagner defines dash as a situation in which two or more human beings desire goals which they perceived as being obtainable by one or the other, but not both. Conflict. Dash inferred that without conflict we cannot have change. Ross, 1993. Ross, 1993, inferred that without conflict we cannot have dash dash. Change. Conflict that produces negative results is referred to as dash dash. Destructive conflict. Dash see conflict as incompatible behavior between parties whose interests are or appear to be incompatible or clashing. Action Aid, 1994, and Hoyvik and Meyer, 1994. The following are the causes of conflict. Conflicts over resources. Conflicts over psychological needs. Conflicts involving values. Conflicts over inadequate information. Conflict is inevitable. True. Which of these types of conflicts are usually easy to identify? Conflicts over resources. Conflicts over dash occurs when two or more people are competing for inadequate, or perceived to be inadequate, resources over a period of time. Resources. Conflicts over dash assume negative or destructive dimension when the available resources are not evenly and judiciously distributed. Resources. Marxian theory of conflict states that the more the rate of unequal distribution of scarce resources in the society, the greater the basic conflict of interest between its dominant and subordinate segments. Dash theory of conflict states that the more the rate of unequal distribution of scarce resources in the society, the greater the basic conflict of interest between its dominant and subordinate segments. Marxian. Resources that cause conflict include these: landed properties, money, vehicles, company ownership/shares. Conflicts which cannot be seen but affect the psyche of the individual and group: self-actualization, need for individual and group respect, attempt to project one's group to be better than the others is conflict over psychological needs. Maslow's theory states that when an individual's psychological need is achieved or satisfied, such an individual becomes dominated by a drive for the other unsatisfied needs through a process called fulfillment progression. The following causes conflict over psychological needs. Structural factor. Politics. Personality clash. Ethnicity. Conflict involving are the most difficult to understand and resolve because most times people could die for what they believe in. Values. The most difficult conflict to understand and resolve is conflict involving values. According to likens culture to an iceberg and inferred that internal culture is implicitly learned and difficult to change. Weaver. States that when an individual's psychological need is achieved or satisfied, such an individual becomes dominated by a drive for the other unsatisfied needs through a process called fulfillment progression. Maslow's theory. Jalan's post and published cartoons caricaturing Prophet Muhammad on September 30, 2005. The most recent, conflict involving values, religious crisis in Nigeria is the Boko Haram crisis that has killed an estimated people. 3,500. The most recent, conflict involving values, religious crisis in Nigeria is the crisis that has killed an estimated 3,500 people. Boko Haram. Boko Haram religious crisis in Nigeria is conflict involving values. Conflict over information can either be manipulative or constructive. Conflict over information can either be or manipulative or constructive. Conflict over information can either be or constructive, manipulative. These are communication barriers that are capable of distorting meanings. Physical distance. Language. Listeners value judgment. The following are types of conflict. Intrapersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict. Intragroup conflict. Intergroup conflict. National conflict. International conflict. Conflict that occurs within an individual is called intrapersonal conflict. These are examples of intrapersonal conflict. Use of time. Choice of partner. Moral questions. Goals and aspirations. Refers to conflict between two or more individuals over an issue. Interpersonal conflict. Refers to conflict between individuals, or faction within a group. Intragroup conflict. Refers to conflict between groups such as club, class versus class, family versus family. Intergroup conflict. Refers to conflicts within a nation, involving different groups within the nation. National conflict. The article A Comparative of Civil Strife was authored by Ted Robert Gurr. Work titled his work on classification of conflict conflict resolution. Was a great social philosopher. Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a great philosopher. Social. Is the great social philosopher who opines that the degree of inequality in the distribution of resources generates inherent conflicts of interest. Karl Marx. Sees conflict as highly contingent on the emergence of charismatic leaders who could mobilize subordinates. Weber. Weber sees conflict as highly contingent on the emergence of who could mobilize subordinates. Charismatic leaders. Theory model of Dahrendorf can be classified as exogenous and endogenous conflicts. The conflict is the conflict that is generated with an organization, system, or a society. Endogenous. The conflict is generated external factors. Endogenous. Theory of conflict asserts that certain conflicts are based on certain social structural arrangements and hence are bound to arise whenever such structural arrangements are given. Dahrendorf, 1958. The school emerged as a criticism to the political doctrine of sovereignty, the notion that in an independent political system. Pluralist. The pluralists believed that within any political system, there are groups with their own interests and beliefs, and the government itself depends on their consent, loyalty, and cooperation to survive. Proposed structural, functional theory after the World War II. Talcott Parson, 1960. Talcott Parson, 1960, proposed structural functional theory after the World War II. Helder, 1958, theory of structural balance states that ego tends to like whom his friend like, but dislike whom his enemy like. According to Person, Novak, and Gleason, 1982:1, the word ethnic was derived via Latin from the Greek ethnos, which means nation or race. The word ethnic was derived from the Greek word ethnos. The Greek word ethnos means nation or race. The definition of ethnic group as a community of people who have the conviction that they have a common identity and common fate based on issues of origin, kinship, ties, traditions, cultural uniqueness, a shared history, and possibly a shared language is credited to Thompson, 2000. The assumption on ethnicity and conflict, therefore, states that ethnic identity has a symbolic dimension which makes conflict arising from it more intense than otherwise. Ethnicity has the symbolic capability of defining for individual the totality of his existence, including his hopes, fears, and sense of the future. Culture is the sum total of all human existence, which comprises norms, values, traditions, beliefs, customs, languages, patterns of behaviors, art, music, food, mode of dressing. An interesting book called Mindsets was written by Glenn Fisher. Proposed that social conflict emerges and develops on the basis of the meaning and interpretation people involved attach to action and events. John Paul Lederach. One of these is the best known theorists and practitioners in the field of conflict transformation today. John Paul Lederach. Is defined as that set of activities associated with any given position in an organization, which include potential behaviors in that position, and not only those of the incumbent in question. Role. Is defined as that set of activities associated with any given position in an organization. Role. The Chinese people do not see conflict as negative in their language. True. The see conflict as an opportunity or chance for change as well as risk or danger. Chinese. Conflict is neither positive nor negative. True. The two key propelling variables in conflict, escalation, cycle, opportunity and willingness. There are key propelling variables in conflict, escalation, cycle. 2. And willingness are the key propelling variables in conflict, escalation, cycle. Opportunity. Opportunity and are the key propelling variables in conflict, escalation, cycle. Willingness. The desire or need to act is called willingness. The following are the stages of conflicts emerging in different parts of the world. 1. Formation stage, early warning signs. 2. Escalation stage. 3. Violent crisis. 4. De-escalation stage. 5. Improvement stage. 6. Transformation stage. The stage is the first stage of conflict whereby a problem emerges and acts or things, or situations that were previously ignored or taken for granted now turn to serious issues. Formation. The stage is characterized by the formation of enemy images. Escalation. The stage in which parties in conflict begin to experience gradual cessation of hostility arising from conflict weariness, hunger, sanctions or external intervention is De-escalation stage. At stage, stakeholders begin to have a rethink, shift ground, and needs for dialogue are recognized and efforts are made towards attaining relative peace. Improvement. Is a conflict stage whereby all causes of conflicts have been removed at this stage and reconciliation has occurred. Transformation stage. Is the first phase of the conflict cycle where a conflict is dormant and barely expressed by the conflicting sides that may not even be conscious of their conflicting interests or values. Latent phase. A conflict can easily be nipped in the bud through a preventive action on the basis of early warning in principle. Dash is characterized by direct physical attacks and confrontations leading to spilling of blood and loss of life of both conflicting parties. Violent phase. A phase whereby conflicting parties express their demands and grievances openly, but only by legal means is dash dash. Manifest phase. Escalation comes to a halt in dash phase. Contained. The dash phase is the most perceived critical stage of all the conflict phases, as success or failure of post-conflict peace building will determine whether the conflict will flare up again. Resolution. The following are ways in which individual, groups, societies or nations handle conflict. Assertiveness. Cooperativeness. Dominating/competing. Compromising. Collaborating. Avoiding. Accommodating. Conflict handling styles are dash dash, cooperativeness and problem solving. Assertiveness. Conflict handling styles are assertiveness, dash and problem solving. Cooperativeness. Conflict handling styles are assertiveness, cooperativeness and dash dash. Problem solving. Conflict handling styles are dash dash. Assertiveness, cooperativeness, and problem solving. Dash takes place when an individual is very assertive and not cooperative. Dominating/competing. Dash is a critical review, interpretation, and explanation of what is observed and recorded about the conflict situation. Conflict analysis. Dash is a process by which the root causes, dynamics, issues, and other fundamentals of conflict are examined, reviewed, and unraveled through the use of various mechanisms for proper and better understanding of the conflict from several perspectives. Conflict. Dash are those men and women, group, or parties who are directly or indirectly involved in the conflict and have a significant stake in the outcome. Stakeholders. The following are categories of stakeholders. Primary stakeholders. Interested stakeholders. Secondary stakeholders. Primary stakeholders are the direct investors in conflict. Dash are those whose goals are, or are perceived by them to be incompatible and who interact directly in pursuit of their respective goals. Primary stakeholders. Like, share and subscribe. Dash are affected directly by the outcome of conflict but do not feel to be directly involved. Secondary stakeholders. NB. The difference between interested and secondary stakeholders is that the interested stakeholders suffer no direct impact of the conflict in the short and medium term. The criteria for determining primary stakeholders include these: functional, representatively, moral authority. The following are elements required to structure analysis of stakeholders: relationship, agenda/power, needs, action. According to Dash, the first step in intervening to manage a particular conflict is known as conflict mapping. Where, 1979. According to Where, 1979, the first step in intervening to manage a particular conflict is known as dash dash. Conflict mapping. Dash is defined as graphical representation of the conflict in which the conflicting parties are placed in relation to the situation on ground. Conflict mapping. Dash are used to understand conflict situation better, to ascertain where power lies, examine conflict clearly from one viewpoint and weigh out or new strategies. Maps. Dash is the process, which involves monitoring, observing and recording the trend of change and continuity in the conflict process. Conflict tracking. The process which involves monitoring, observing and recording the trend of change and continuity in the conflict process is called dash dash. Conflict tracking. CRESNET is an acronym for dash dash. Conflict Resolution Stakeholders Network. Like, share and subscribe. Dash is a graph that shows events plotted against a particular time scale. Timeline. The following are importance of timeline in a conflict situation. It shows events plotted against a particular time scale. It shows different views of history in a conflict. It helps to clarify each side's perception of events. It lists date and depicts events in chronological order. In a conflict situation, groups of people often have completely different experiences and perceptions. True. Timeline is not a research tool per se but a way to prompt discussion and learning. True. In conflict situation, dash is used early in a process along with either analytical tools or later in the process to help in strategy building. Timeline. Like, share and subscribe. Dash is a tool which can be used to identify the different forces influencing a conflict. Force field analysis. An analytical tool that is based on the premise that any individual or society that is in conflict is sick and therefore they need to see a doctor is called dash dash. DPT model. DPT model means D. Diagnosis, P. Progress, T. Therapy. There is a direct relationship between conflict and our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. True. Negative conflict expression reduces our overall capacity to build a healthy society. True. Dash is a graphic tool built on the premise that some situations are not really stable, but are being held up by a range of factors or forces, which are the pillars. Pillars. Conflict can be prevented or resolved. True. Dash involves the transformation of issues, actor, structures, and rules. Conflict transformation. Dash is an essentially integrative conflict resolution orientation that aims at positively altering those perceptions, communication, and root factors that instigate conflicts. Conflict transformation. Like, share and subscribe. Dash is defined as an improvement of the whole context of the conflict, a positive change in the disputants' relationships or complete behavioral and attitudinal changes of the disputants. Conflict transformation. Dash is referred to as a particular approach that takes into cognizance the grievances, needs and issues of all the parties. Conflict transformation. Dash educates and enlightens parties in conflict to see conflict not as necessarily destructive or negative but as a means of tapping into the opportunities embedded in conflict issues for the shared benefits. Conflict transformation. Dash certified that conflict transformation is a prescriptive concept. Lederach. Dash certified that conflict transformation is a prescriptive concept. Lederach. Types of conflict transformation. Issue transformation. Rule transformation. Structural transformation. OAU is the acronym for dash dash. Organization of African Unity. IGAD is the acronym for dash dash. Intergovernment Agency on Drought and Development. These are characteristics of perception and conflict. Perception and the environment. The perceptual process and meanings. Transition from perception to action. Perception and cognition. Perception and need satisfaction. Which of these factors is probably responsible for the ethnic conflicts we frequently experience in Nigeria? Transition from perception to action. The causes of conflict framework are the following. Perception and psychological needs. Like, share and subscribe. Perception and values. Perception and common resources. Barriers to social perception included the following. Selective perception. Stereotyping. First impression error. Implicit personality theories. Self-fulfilling prophecies. A generalization about a group of people is called dash dash. Stereotyping. Pygmalion effect is also known as dash dash. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Dash effect is also known as self-fulfilling prophecy. Pygmalion. According to Nelson and Quick, self-fulfilling prophecy is also known as dash dash. Pygmalion effect. Self-fulfilling prophecy in barriers to social perception is also called the dash dash. Pygmalion effect. According to Rao and Narayana, 1998, a dash can improve his perceptual accuracy if he becomes aware of how perceptions are formed and distorted. Manager. There are over different languages in used every day in Nigeria. 450. The most common language-based barriers to communication are bypassing, indiscrimination, polarization. A situation whereby what is said and what is heard and understood by the listener often differ. Such misunderstanding between a sender and a receiver is called bypassing. The following are ways to reduce bypassing. Be approachable. Be person-minded, not word-minded. Query and paraphrase. Like, share and subscribe. Be sensitive to contexts. Restating a message in your own words gives you and the other party or the sender a chance to check that you receive a similar message to what was sent. True. Is the neglect of individual differences and the overemphasis of similarities in discrimination. A common language-based barriers to communication, which is a form of perceptual set in which a person chooses to ignore differences and changes in events, things, and people, is known as indiscrimination. Plays a significant role in our tendency to see similarities between things even when they do not exist. Language. Is categorizing events, objects, and people without regard to unique individual characteristics. Stereotype. Stereotyping may be negative or positive. Is the tendency to view things in terms of extremes, rich or poor, beautiful or ugly, large or small, high or low, good or bad, intelligent or stupid. Polarization. The situation whereby polarization could be destructive, escalating conflict to the point at which two parties simply cannot communicate, is referred to as pendulum effect. The represents a person's perception of reality, which includes feelings, attitude, opinions, and value judgments about the world. Pendulum. When the pendulum is hanging in the center a person's perception is considered to be realistic, virtuous, intelligent, sane, honest, and honorable. When two individuals disagree in their perception of reality, their pendulum begins to move in directions. Opposite. The distance the pendulum swings represents the differences in opinion or conviction. Like, share and subscribe. There is a difference in how men and women use language and converse with one another. True. English language is structured with an inherent bias in favor of men. True. A is a figure of speech that associated two things or ideas, not commonly linked, as a means of description. Metaphor. Used in our culture to describe men and women are often sexist. Metaphors. The following are ways to use language for effective communication. Use accurate language. Use vivid language. Use of immediate language. Use appropriate language. Use metaphorical language. NB. Metaphorically, language is culture bound, and most metaphors have meanings only within a specific language community. According to social psychologists, vivid language affects us in several ways. True. The goal of is to exchange meaning and understanding in any conflict resolution situation. Communication. A warning at an early stage of an event or a set of circumstances that will have negative consequence is called early warning. Can be defined as the collection, analysis, and communication of the relevant evidence and conclusions to the policy makers to enable them make choices. Early warning. Early warning is the systematic collection and analysis of information coming from areas of crisis for the following purposes: A. Anticipating the escalation of violent conflict. B. The development of strategic responses to these crises. C. The presentation of options to critical actors for purposes of decision-making and preventive action. Like, share and subscribe. Is a complex system of indicators to predict the probability that a crisis is likely to happen so that preventive action can be taken on time. Early warning. The following are importance or benefits of early warning. It is a crisis and disaster protection mechanism. It promotes public-private partnership. It introduces and supports services at the local level that directly enhance development. It advances community participation for its own sake. It reveals the causes of conflict. Effective early warning promotes improved environmental management and sustainable livelihood. Dash refers to any initiative that occurs in the latent stages of a perceived potential armed conflict, man-made or natural disaster with the aim of reduction, resolution, or transformation. Early response. The process of consultation, policy making, planning, and action to reduce or avoid armed conflict, or to guide against, reduce or mitigate the effects of natural or man-made disasters on people or the environment is called --. Early response. According to the United Nations General Assembly, is the process of using information gathered from early warning systems to design action aimed at preventing violent conflict. Early response. The following are types of early warning. Conflict early warning. Disaster early warning. Hazards assessment. Is a type of early warning information or system aimed at preventing an impending conflict that could take any form if not quickly prevented. Conflict early warning. Is geared towards preventing or minimizing an impending natural disaster that is inevitable or cannot be prevented, such as earthquake, hurricane, tsunami, climate change. Disaster early warning. Is the collection, analysis, and communication of evidence discovered at the scene of an accident or calamity. Hazards assessment. Like, share and subscribe. The following are the various forms of early warning indicators. Economic indicators. Environmental indicators. Social indicators. Political indicators. Security indicators. Demographic indicators. Educational indicators. Rural indicators. Individual security/safety. Are weapons or instruments that can easily be operated by an individual meant to cause harm. Small arms. Are weapons, with anticipated lethal effect, that are operated with the combined support of a crew of 2 or 3. Light weapons. The following are examples of small arms. Rifles and carbines. Submachine gun. Assault rifles. Light machine guns. Revolvers and self-loading pistols. Characteristic of small arms and light weapons are simplicity and durability, portability and concealability, military/police and civilian uses, low cost and wide availability, lethality. A situation in which two countries or group of countries are continually trying to get more and better weapons than each other is called --. Arms race. Refers to competition between nations to have the most powerful armaments. Arms race. A race between hostile nations to accumulate or develop weapons is known as --. Arms race. Like, share and subscribe. Refers to the easy availability or influx of illicit small arms and light weapons into wrong hands or unauthorized groups of people for use against the individuals or groups meant to be protected. Arms proliferation. A rapid increase or growth in number of deadly weapons is called --. Arms proliferation. The following are causes of arms proliferation. Undemocratic governance. Undemocratic electoral process. Weak economic base of most countries engulfed with crisis. Uneven distribution of basic infrastructure. Military coups. Ethnicity. Weak stockpile and management of national arms and ammunitions. Post-colonial or Cold War remnants. Movement of refugees/dominant of refugees camps by armed groups. Failed state. The following are effects of arms proliferation. Arms proliferation sustains and exacerbates armed conflicts. It endangers peacekeepers and humanitarian workers. It undermines respect for international humanitarian law. It threatens legitimate but weak government. It benefits terrorists as well as the perpetrators of organized crime. It endangers the lives of defenseless individuals or citizens. It threatens unity and peaceful coexistence of plural states. Is an umbrella term for restrictions upon the development, production, stockpiling, proliferation, and usage of weapons, especially weapons of mass destruction. Arms control. Arms control is often referred to as gun. Politics. The following are the aims of arms control. Arms control is meant to break the security dilemma. It aims at mutual security between partners and overall stability. Arms control comes with cost reduction and damage limitation. Like, share and subscribe. Arms control was developed both in theory and in practice during the between the late 1940s and 1991. Cold War. The acronym USSR stands for Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Is an applied strategy for executing successful peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace-building operations in a conflict zone, state or country. Demilitarization. The following processes or methods may lead to demilitarization. Disarmament. Demobilization. Reinsertion. Reintegration. Example of demilitarization is the amnesty and post-amnesty operational activities extended to the Niger Delta militant groups by the Nigerian government. DDR stands for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. The following are prerequisites for DDR. Security. Sufficient funding. Inclusion of all ex-belligerents. Requirements for successful DDR implementation include these: reduction of military expenditure, reorientation of military research and development, conversion of the arms industry, demobilization and reintegration, redevelopment of troops, safe disposal and management of surplus weapons. There are aspects to a successful DDR conversion. 6. The word peace is derived from the Latin word pax. Like, share and subscribe. A situation or a period of time in which there is no war or violence in a country or an area is often described as peaceful. A state of harmony, absence of hostility or nonviolent way of life is called peace. Can be describe a relationship between any people characterized by respect, justice, and goodwill. Peace. The following words signify peace in different languages. Shalom, Hebrew. Salam, Arabic. Alafia, Yoruba. Udo, Igbo. Is a phenomenon that emerged as late as 10,000 years ago. Violence. Violence is a phenomenon that emerged as late as years ago. 10,000 is a process of imparting specific skills, attitude, and knowledge on people, thereby solving problems by building consensus, creating cultural awareness and showing empathy, expected to build positive attitude about justice and respect for democracy. Peace education. The aims of peace education are the following: to help understand the nature and origins of violence, to create frameworks for achieving peaceful creative society, to sharpen awareness about the existence of unpeaceful relationships between people, to investigate the causes of conflicts and violence embedded within perceptions. Acronym UNICEF stands for United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. Is based on a philosophy that teaches nonviolence, love, compassion, trust, fairness, cooperation and reverence for the human family and all life on planet Earth. Peace education. Seek to establish democratic classrooms that teach cooperation and promote positive self-esteem among their students. Peace educators. Like, share and subscribe. An organization that embodies the world community with its members drawn from independent sovereign states is called International Organization. The International Organization General Assembly meeting is usually held in a year in the month of September. Once. The International Organization General Assembly meeting is usually held once in a year in the month of September. The is the permanent decision-making organ of the UN and all the members are bound to carry out its resolutions. Security Council. Security Council was incepted in 1945 Security Council was incepted in 1945 and had dash members. 11 The number of members of Security Council increased to 15 in dash dash. 1963 United Nations, UN, organization was founded in dash dash. 1945 Iraq pulled out of Kuwait in the year dash dash. 1991 The foremost officer of the United Nations is the dash dash Secretary General. The former occupiers of the exalted office from inception of UN Secretary General are the following: Trigavi Lai, Dag Hammarskjöld, Uthant, Boutros Ghali, Kofi Annan, Ban Ki-moon. Like, share and subscribe. The current Secretary General of United Nations Organization is Ban Ki-moon. ILO stands for dash dash International Labour Organization. The International Labour Organization, ILO, has its headquarters in dash dash Geneva. FAO stands for dash dash Food and Agricultural Organization. FAO is based in dash dash Rome. Dash is the body concerned with world food supplies and agricultural development. FAO. UNESCO means dash dash United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. UNESCO headquarter is located in dash dash Paris. International Court of Justice is based in dash dash Hague. Dash sees to the judicial settlement of conflicts referred to it by conflict states. ICJ. United Nations International Children's Educational Fund, UNICEF, was formed in dash dash 1946 WHO, means dash dash World Health Organization. Dash was founded to see to the health needs of the world. WHO. The acronym EU is dash dash European Union. The evolution of European Union, EU, has its roots in the post-dash politics of Western Europe. World War II. Like, share and subscribe. The European Union, EU, was formerly known as dash dash European Economic Community. EU stands for dash dash European Union. African Union was formerly known as dash dash Organization of African Unity. The Organization of African Unity, OAU, was born on May 25 in Addis Ababa. 1963 The decolonization of Namibia took place in dash dash 1990 Organization of African Unity, OAU, metamorphosed into the African Union, O, on July in South Africa. 2002 The acronym ECOWAS means dash dash Economic Community of West African States. The treaty which established the Economic Community of West African States was signed in Lagos on May 28 1975 The treaty which established the Economic Community of West African States was signed in Lagos. The treaty which established the Economic Community of West African States was signed by states. 15 were the major countries behind the foundation of ECOWAS: Togo and Nigeria. The organs of Article 4 of ECOWAS Treaty are the following: A. The authority of the heads of state and government. B. The Council of Ministers. C. The Secretariat. D. The Tribunal, later called Court of Justice. Like, share and subscribe. The heads of states and government which represents the supreme organ of ECOWAS is referred to as dash dash the authority. The basic function of Court of Justice is to ensure that law and justice is observed and settles any dispute referred to it by any ECOWAS member state. The Commonwealth of Nations originated in the century 20th. The following countries are among the earliest members of the Commonwealth organizations: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa. Ireland ceased to be a member of Commonwealth due to racial problem in 1949. South Africa ceased to be a member of Commonwealth as a result of her apartheid policy in 1961 A variety of approaches aimed at terminating conflicts through the constructive solving of problems, distinct from management or transformation of conflict is called conflict resolution. Refers to the process or an act geared towards reducing the negative and destructive capacity of conflict through various means or measures and by working with and through the stakeholder, parties, involved in a conflict. Conflict management. Postulated the term conflict transformation in 1995. John Paul Lederach. John Paul Lederach postulated the term conflict transformation in 1995 a situation whereby the state or government uses its coercive apparatus to suppress opponents or conflicts which cannot be sustained because conflict can still resurface at any time or with little provocation is referred to as conflict suppression. Like, share and subscribe. John Paul Lederach postulated the term conflict transformation in 1995 a structured process of dialogue between conflicting parties about issues in which their opinions differ is called negotiation. There are types of negotiation. 2. There are two types of negotiation and positional negotiation / bargaining and principled or collaborative negotiation. Principled negotiation relies on the following basic elements: people, interests, options, criteria / legitimacy. And is an examination of issues in order to establish facts that may be in dispute. Inquiry. A hortatory resolution on peaceful settlement of international dispute was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 12, 1974. The concept conciliation was defined by the International Law Institute in 1961. Is a process of formulating proposals of settlement after an investigation of the facts and an effort to reconcile opposing contentions, the parties to the dispute being left free to accept or reject the proposals formulated. Conciliation. Is the use of or bringing a third party to intervene with respect to a conflict. Mediation. Mediation is also referred to as facilitated negotiation. Is a voluntary, informal, non-binding process undertaken by an external party that fosters the settlement of differences or demands between directly invested parties. Mediation. The use of or bringing a third party to intervene with respect to a conflict is called mediation. Like, share and subscribe. Beer and Steve, 1997, defined as any process for resolving disputes in which another person helps the parties negotiate a settlement. Mediation. Can simply be defined as the use and assistance of a neutral third party in conflict. Arbitration. Is defined by the International Law Commission as a procedure for the settlement of disputes between states by a binding award on the basis of law and as a result of an undertaking voluntarily accepted. International arbitration. The Hague Conference of 1899 on the Pacific settlement of international disputes led to the creation of an institution known as the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The Hague Conference of 1899 led to the creation of an institution known as the Permanent Court of Arbitration. International Court of Justice, ICI, is also called The World Court. International Court of Justice or World Court is situated at the Peace Palace, at The Hague. The is the judicial organ of the 6 principal organs of the United Nations. International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice is the judicial organ of the principal organs of the United Nations. 6. The International Court of Justice was first established and called Permanent Court of International Justice, PCIJ, after the First World War in 1921. The First World War took place in 1921. The Second World War took place 1946. Like, share and subscribe. Dash is a phrase used to describe retaliatory action taken by one foreign government against another for the stringent or harsh regulation or treatment of its citizens who are within the geographical boundaries of the foreign country. Retortion in international law. The term dash refers to the biological characteristics of male and female. Sex. Dash is the term used to denote the social characteristics assigned to men and women. Gender. Dash refers to a strategy to strengthen gender equality through policy and resource allocation that reflect the interests of both men and women. Gender mainstreaming. Dash is a means of control and oppression that can include emotional, social, or economic force, coercion or pressure, as well as physical harm. Violence. The misuse of power through which the perpetrator gains control or advantage of the abused, using and causing physical or psychological harm or inciting fear of the potential to harm called abuse. Dash prevents persons from making free decisions and forces them to behave against their will. Abuse. Dash is defined as forcing or attempting to force another person to engage in behaviors against his or her will by using threats, verbal insistence, manipulation, deception, cultural expectations, or economic power. Coercion. Dash is when a person makes an informed choice to agree freely and voluntarily to do something. Consent. A dash is a person, group, or institution that directly inflicts, supports, and condones violence or other abuse against a person or a group of persons. Perpetrator. Dash are in a position of real or perceived power, decision-making and or authority and can thus exert control over their victims. Perpetrators. The Fourth World Conference in took place 1995. Like, share and subscribe. From 1995 to 1998, Dash was the site of the world's largest UN peacekeeping operation. Angola. Dash refers to a state of using military force against another state when the chief publicly declared aim of that military action is ending human rights violations being perpetrated by the state against which it is directed. Humanitarian intervention. The following are types of humanitarian intervention. UN-authorized interventions. Unauthorized interventions. Status quo. Excusable breach. Customary law. Codification. Dash may be employed to deter military aggression or to force an aggressor to withdraw its armed forces from a disputed territory. Economic blockade. Dash said the purpose of sanctions is to modify the behavior of a party that is threatening international peace and security and not to punish or otherwise exact retribution. Boutros-Ghali. Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace, and Security was adopted on October 31. 2000. A person's common sense and accumulated and knowledge are the primary basis of how he creates, understand, and respond to conflict. Experience. Conflict emerges through an process. Interactive. Conflict involving religious belief and ideology are classified as based conflict. Value. People who are engaged in conflicts are technically called conflict parties or Stakeholders. Conflict over occurs when two or more people members of a religious sect are competing for space. Religion. Like, share and subscribe. Stereotyping may lead to conflict over Misinformation. Robert is the author of A Comparative of Civil Strife. Unjust, repressive, and oppressive socio-political system leads to conflict. Structural. The interpersonal conflict happens between or among two or more people. Conflict between two social entities like association or family is termed conflict. Intergroup. The establishment and persistence of interaction tend to depend on emergence and identification of and alter roles. Ego. When a group of people are determined to embark on actions to change their situation, they are said to have shown willingness. Theory of needs is associated with Maslow. The first phase of conflict when it is dormant is called dash phase. Latent. Dash suggests that the degree of inequality in the distribution of resources generates inherent conflicts of interest. Karl Marx. The physical environment of a conflict is the same as the dash dash. Context. Conflict may have either positive or dash outcome depending on how it is handled. Negative. When an intervener tries to clarify which issue is most important in a conflict, he is said to have embarked on conflict dash dash. Analysis. The size of the circle in conflict mapping indicates power relations of the dash dash. Like, share and subscribe. Parties. Dash championed the course of structural functional theory after the World War II. Talcott. The organs of ECOWAS are dash dash. For the treaty that established ECOWAS was signed in what year dash dash? 1976. The treaty establishing ECOWAS was signed in dash dash. Lagos. The West African sub-region was colonized by dash dash. Several foreign powers. ECOWAS was established in dash dash. Accra. Economic Community of West African sub-region were colonized by dash dash. Britain. To advance the development of the continent by promoting research is not part of the objective of all. False. The organs in the African Union are dash dash. The Executive Council. African Union and Pan-African Treaty was signed in dash dash. Nigeria. A treaty recommending the creation of African Union and the Pan-African Parliament was signed in the year dash dash. 1991 dash is defined as that set of activities associated with any given position in an organization. Role. The objectives of OAU are dash dash. Promote International War Pact. Like, share and subscribe. One of these is not a member of Monrovia Group dash dash. Ghana. The Monrovia Group Charter was signed in dash dash. None of the above. Casablanca Group Charter was signed in on January 7 dash dash. 1961 The Organization of African Unity, OAU, was born in dash dash. 1963 The evolution of European Union has its roots in the post-dash politics of Western Europe. World War XI. United Nations International Children's Educational Fund, UNICEF, set up in dash dash. 1946 The International Labour Congress, ILO, with its headquarters in dash dash. Geneva. The former occupier of the exalted office of Secretary General was dash dash. All of the above. One of these is not a stage of conflict dash dash. Exposure stage. Geneva Conventions prohibited recruitment of children less than 18 years into the armed forces, among others. False. One of these is not an approach to the legitimacy of humanitarian intervention in the absence of Security Council authorization. Unauthorization. Dash is when a person makes an informed choice to agree freely and voluntarily to do something. Consent. Dash prevents person from making free decisions and forces them to behave against their will. Abuse. The term dash refers to the biological characteristics of male and female. Sex. Like, share and subscribe. Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security was adopted on October 31. 2000 Former Secretary General, said that the purpose of sanctions is to modify the behavior of a party that is threatening international peace and security and not to punish or otherwise extract retribution. Golly. Might be employed to deter military aggression or to force an aggressor to withdraw its armed forces from a disputed territory. Blockade. Is another coercive or forcible legal means of conflict resolution by which a nation may show its disapproval by way of retaliation for the discourteous act of another state. Retortion. Can simply be defined as the use and assistance of a neutral third party in conflict, who listen to evidence put forward by parties in conflict. Arbitration. Is a voluntary, informal, non-binding process undertaken by an external party that fosters the settlement of differences or demands before seen directly invested parties. Mediation. The concept conciliation was defined by the International Law Institutes in -- 1961 -- can be defined as a peaceful way of ending a conflict or a situation that may lead to conflict negotiation. -- refers to the process or an act geared towards reducing the negative and destruction capacity of conflict through various means or measures and by working with and through the stakeholders involved in a conflict. Conflict management. One of these is not part of Article 1 of the United Nations Charter. To wage war against international economy. South Africa ceased to be a member of Commonwealth of Nations because apartheid policy. Like, share and subscribe. South Africa ceased to be a member of Commonwealth of Nations in -- 1961. Germany is not a permanent member of Security Council. True. Security Council at its inception in 1945, it had - members. 11 decisions of General Assembly are normally reached by - of the members. 2/3. The General Assembly meets once in a year, usually in - and each member's state is represented in the morning. September. In traumatic situation, a person is rendered powerless and faces the threat of death and injury. True. The relational dimension of peace building focuses on -- all of the above. Peace educators seek to establish democratic classrooms that teach cooperation and promote positive self-esteem among their student. True. In -- peace education is narrowly defined as anti-atomic bomb. Japan. In Japan, - is narrowly defined as anti-atomic bomb. Peace education. In Japan, peace education is narrowly defined as - anti-atomic bomb. There are - aspects of a successful of DDR conversion. 6. DDR means - disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Specific objective of the DDR program is to increase the size of the armed forces and the other natural organization forces. False. Like, share and subscribe. - is the assistance offered to an ex-combatant during mobilization but prior to the longer terms process of reintegration. Reorganization. - is an umbrella term for restrictions upon the development, production, stockpiling, proliferation and usage of weapons, especially weapons of mass destruction. Arm control. Arms control is not meant to break the security dilemma. False. Proliferation of arms threatens legitimate but weak government. True. There are over - different languages in use every day in Nigeria. 450 timeline is not a research tool per se but a way to prompt discussion and learning. True. - is the process, which involve monitoring, observing and recording the trend of change and continuity in the conflict process. Conflict tracking. When stakeholders begin to have a rethink, shift ground, and need for dialogue recognized and efforts are made towards attaining relative peace. Improvement stage. The first stage of conflict whereby the problem emerges and acts or things or situation that were previously ignored and taken for granted now turn to serious issues is called - the formative stage. There are two key propelling variables in conflict cycle, opportunity and willingness. True. - is defined as a community of people who have the conviction that they have a common identity and common fate based on issues on origin and shared language. Ethnicity. - in this theory states that ego tends like whom his friend, but dislike whom his enemy like. Helder. Like, share and subscribe. - introduces to the theory of conflict the view of productive and constructive conflict. Randolph. See conflicts as highly contingent on the emergence of charismatic leaders who could mobilize subordinate. Randolph. Is the great social philosopher opines that the degree of inequality in the distribution of resources generate inherent conflict of interest. Karl Marx. Conflict as a term is derived from - word and it means strike together. Latin. The contradiction that arises from differences in interests, ideas, ideologies, orientations, beliefs, perceptions, and tendencies is referred to as dash dash. Conflict. One of the scholar's definitions for dash suggests it as opposition among social entities directed against one another. Conflict. Social research is the step-by-step scientific research activities carried out by social dash dash scientists. Conflict over dash occurs when two or more people are competing for inadequate resources over a period of resources. Conflict involving dash are the most difficult to understand and resolve because most times people could die for what they believe in. Values. Cold War, suicide bombing, religious conflicts are examples of conflict involving dash dash values. Conflict over information is one of the causes of dash dash conflict. The conflict that happens within an individual is referred to as dash personal conflict. Intra conflict between groups like club or family is termed dash conflict. Like, share and subscribe. Intergroup conflict between fractions of a group is termed dash conflict. Intragroup dash conflict is referred to as conflict within a nation. National dash conflict is referred to as conflict between nations. International. Karl Marx's theory is one of the conflict theories from dash perspective. Sociological. Max Weber's theory is part of the conflict theories from dash perspective. Sociological. Dash opinion about conflict suggests that the degree of inequality in the distribution of resources generates inherent conflicts of interest. Karl Marx's dash in his theory opined that the more degree of inequality in the distribution of the available/scarce resources in the society, the greater the basic conflict of interest between its dominant and subordinate segments. Karl Marx. According to dash conflict is highly contingent on the emergency of the charismatic leaders who could mobilize subordinates. Max Weber. Conflict between superordinates and subordinates becomes more likely when charismatic leaders can mobilize resentment of subordinates in the opinion of dash in his theory. Max Weber. Dahrendorf introduced to the theory of conflict the view of dash and constructive conflict. Productive. Dahrendorf conflict theory model present that in every imperatively coordinated group, the carriers of positive and the negative dominant roles determine two dash groups with opposite latent interest. Quasi. Talcott Parson champions the course of dash functional theory after the World War II. Structural. Like, share and subscribe. The dash do not see conflict as negative in their language, but as an opportunity or chance for change as well as risk or danger. Chinese. Dash and willingness are two key propelling variables in conflict cycle. Opportunity. There are dash key propelling variables in escalation cycle. 2. Dash speaks of the available resources at the disposal of a person, group, or a country such as money, people, arms, land, minerals, good organization, external support and many more. Opportunity. Dash is the need to act in the variable of conflict cycle. Willingness. There dash various stages of conflicts emerging in different parts of the world. 6. The first stage of conflict whereby a problem emerges and acts or things, or situations that were previously ignored or taken for granted now turn to serious issues is referred to as dash stage. Formation. Dash stage characterized by the formation of enemy images in various stages of conflicts emerging in different parts of the world. Escalation. Dash stage is the stage in which parties in conflict begin to experience gradual cessation of hostility arising from conflict weariness, hunger, sanctions or external intervention. De-escalation. The latent phase of the conflict dash is where a conflict is dormant and barely expressed by the conflicting sides that may not even be conscious of their conflicting interests or values. Cycle. Dash describes the extent to which an individual attempts to satisfy his needs and concern. Assertiveness. Dash explains the extent to which a person attempts to satisfy his needs and concerns as well as the other person's needs. Cooperativeness. Dash dimension of conflict handling means that you are both assertive and cooperative. Collaborating. Like, share and subscribe. How many key propelling variables are in escalation cycle? 3. The second model grouped conflict handling style into major classifications. 4. What is the common way of dealing with conflict in such a way to avoid the other party/person or pretend that the conflict does not exist even though we are hurt or angry? Avoidance. What is an approach whereby the parties in conflict listen with the intent conflict and attack underlying elements in the conflict and attack the dash. Problem solving. What is conflict analysis? Critical review, interpretation, and explanation of what is observed and recorded about the conflict situation. What is referred to as those men and women, group, or parties who are directly or indirectly involved in the conflict and have a significant stake in the outcome. Categories of stakeholder. A critical review, interpretation, and explanation of what is observed and recorded about the conflict situation. What is this concept? Conflict analysis. What can history of the conflict suggest as alternative approach to conflict management? True. What is timeline? It is a graph that shows events plotted against a particular time scale. What is graphical representation of the conflict in which the conflicting parties are placed in relation to the situation on ground? Conflict mapping. Who states that the more the rate of inequality in the distribution of resources in the society, the greater the conflict of interest between its dominant and subordinate segments? Karl Marx. The following except one are the criteria for determining primary stakeholder in conflict analysis. Like, share and subscribe. Moral indulgence. The following except one are the triangle methods of conflict analysis. Altitude. What does context indicate in the triangle methods of conflict analysis? Background. The onion or donut method of analysis consists of the following except. Agreement. What is the third layer is, the core cause at the conflict situation, in the onion or donut method of analysis. Needs. Which category of conflict can Boko Haram crisis be grouped? Values. Recent clash between cattle rearers and the host community is dash conflict. Intergroup. What is PPP model? People, problem, process. The establishment of the present state of success and where it could be in future in the DPT model. Progress. The prescription or treatment in DPT model indicates. Therapy. The following are the types of transformation in conflict except. Logical transformation. What concept has the fundamental objective to transform unfair social interactions? Conflict transformation. What are some of the factors that impinge on conflict transformation? Issue transformation. When was OAU established? 1963. Like, share and subscribe. Societies are based on certain characteristics those based on achievement and those on ascription. Where was International Court of Justice established? Hague. Coercive or forcible legal means of conflict resolution by which a nation may show its disapproval by way of retaliation for the discourteous act of another state. What is it referred to? Retortion. The imposition of sanction on Iraq at the conclusion of the Gulf War to prevent Iraq from using the revenue from its oil to rearm and particularly to prevent Iraq from building weapons of mass destruction. What is this kind of sanction? Economic sanctions. What is called the differential social roles that define women and men in a cultural context and to power relationships that perpetuate these roles? Gender. Contradicting value systems are factors responsible for social conflict among the interacting parties. Point 1. Of these is not a factor. Financial resources. What is refers to conflict between groups such as club, class versus class, family versus family? Intergroup conflict. Culture simply means way of life. What is the importance of early warning? It promotes public-private partnership. What is timeline? It is a graph that shows events plotted against a particular time scale. Dash is described as the process of reintegrating former combatants into civil society, ensuring against the possibility of a resurgence of armed conflict. Reintegration. What is an umbrella term for restrictions upon the development, production, stockpiling, proliferation, and usage of weapons, especially weapons of mass destruction? Arms control. Like, share and subscribe. What are the two key propelling variables in conflict, escalation, cycle? Opportunity and willingness. How many different languages do we use every day in Nigeria? 450. How do you select and address an issue that is central and reflective in the conflict? Confrontation. Dash provides data on the alarming state of unemployment and underemployment in several African countries. Social indicators. The scholar well known for conflict transformation theory is dash dash. Lederach. Dash stage is the stage in which parties in conflict begin to experience gradual cessation of hostility arising from conflict weariness, hunger, sanctions or external intervention. De-escalation. To ensure that the needs and experiences of women and men, girls and boys are taken into account in all activities of the United Nations it embarks on. Feminism. A critical review, interpretation, and explanation of what is observed and recorded about the conflict situation is dash dash. Conflict analysis. People have hidden interest in a conflict are called dash dash. Shadow parties. A critical monitoring of events or episodes as they occur in conflict situation is dash dash. Conflict tracking. Who wrote the popular book titled Mindset? Glenn Fisher. The third stage of conflict is described as dash dash. Crisis stage. At which phase of conflict has escalation comes to a halt? Contained phase. Like, share and subscribe. What is very important in pre-intervention conflict analysis, especially to ascertain the actual and right time of intervention? Ripening. When one is unassertive and cooperative, he is said to be dash dash. Accommodating. Monitoring, observing and recording the trend of militants' attack in the Niger Delta is technically called dash dash. Conflict tracking. Leadership requires ability to control or influence events or people through dash dash. Persuasion. Question, who states that the more the rate of inequality in the distribution of resources in the society, the greater the conflict of interest between its dominant and subordinate segments? Karl Marx. What has to do with people's actions, emotions, feelings, and thought process? Perception. Question, in the triangle methods of conflict analysis, background information about a conflict is technically called dash dash. Context. Bypassing is a situation whereby a speaker assumes that a word has what number of meaning, s. 1. In the onion or donut method of analysis, the first layer indicates dash dash. Position. The difference forces influencing a conflict can be known through dash dash. Force field analysis. The conflict in southern Kaduna State can be categorized as what type of conflict? Ethno-religious conflict. Cold War came to an end in the dash dash. 1990s. ECOMIG is the military organization set up by which regional body to engage in peace operations. ECOWAS. Traditional distinctions in peace education are couched in terms of positive peace and dash dash. Negative peace. Like, share and subscribe. The establishment of the present state of success and where it could be in future in the DPT model indicates. Progress. Empowering people with knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values to build a nation is called dash dash. Peace education. The Security Council of the United Nations consists of how many members? 15. Targeting both micro and macro levels of economic opportunities of a population in a post-conflict society is economic peace building. Conflict suppression by powerful nations led to failure to intervene in the conflicts in Rwanda and Burundi and eventually led to dash dash. Genocide. European Union was earlier named as dash dash. European Economic Community. Peace enforcement requires parties in conflict to embrace ceasefire. Was the leader of Uganda in 1976. The Air France aircraft was hijacked in Entebbe airport. Idi Amin. The organs of ECOWAS are 4. The treaty that established ECOWAS was signed in what year 1976. The treaty establishing ECOWAS was signed in Lagos. The West African sub-region were colonized by several foreign powers. ECOWAS was established in Accra. Like, share and subscribe. Economic Community of West African sub-region were colonized by Britain. To advance the development of the continent by promoting research is not part of the objective of all. False. The organs in the African Union are The Executive Council. African Union and Pan-African Treaty was signed in Nigeria. A treaty recommending the creation of African Union and the Pan-African Parliament was signed in the year 1991. Is defined as that set of activities associated with any given position in an organization. Role. Casablanca Group Charter was signed in on January 7, 1961. The Organization of African Unity, OAU, was born in 1963. OAU stands for Organization of African Unity. The evolution of European Union has its roots in the post-politics of Western Europe. World War XI. United Nations International Children's Educational Fund, UNICEF, set up in 1946. UNICEF stands for United Nations International Children's Educational Fund. ILO stands for International Labour Congress. The International Labour Congress, ILO, with its headquarters in Geneva. Like, share and subscribe. Is when a person makes an informed choice to agree freely and voluntarily to do something. Consent. Prevents person from making free decisions and forces them to behave against their will. Abuse. Former Secretary General, said that the purpose of sanctions is to modify the behavior of a party that is threatening international peace and security and not to punish or otherwise extract retribution. Golly. May be employed to deter military aggression or to force an aggressor to withdraw its armed forces from a disputed territory. Blockade. Is another coercive or forcible legal means of conflict resolution by which a nation may show its disapproval by way of retaliation for the discourteous act of another state. Retortion. Can simply be defined as the use and assistance of a neutral third party in conflict, who listen to evidence, put forward by parties in conflict. Arbitration. Can be defined as a peaceful way of ending a conflict or a situation that may lead to conflict. Negotiation. Refers to the process or an act geared towards reducing the negative and destruction capacity of conflict through various means or measures and by with and through the stakeholders involved in a conflict. Conflict management. South Africa ceased to be a member of Commonwealth of Nations in 1961. Is defined as a community of people who have the conviction that they behave a common identity and common fate based on issues on origin and shared language. Ethnicity. In this theory states that ego tends like whom his friend, but dislike whom his enemy like. Helder. Introduces to the theory of conflict the view of productive and constructive conflict. Darendoff. Like, share and subscribe. See conflicts as highly contingent on the emergence of charismatic leaders who could mobilize subordinate. Darendoff. Is the great social philosopher opines that the degree of inequality in the distribution of resources generate inherent conflict of interest. Karl Marx. Germany is not a permanent member of Security Council. True. The Pygmalion effect in barrier to perception is also known as self-fulfilling prophecies. The assertion that conflict are processes that tend to degenerate from nonviolent to violent and from crisis to full-scale war can be credited to dash dash. Quickie right. The conflict of fulfillment progression is related to the theory of dash dash. Maslow theory of need. Like, share and subscribe.